If you have a creaking, groaning, juddery, snapping sound coming from what seems like the top of the front wing of a Skoda Fabia MK1, it's probably a failed top strut mount bearing. So stay tuned and I'll show you how to fix that after this short break. If you first open up the bonnet and locate the top strut mounting here, and then get somebody to sit in the car and turn the steering wheel fully from left to right, and you should hear quite a loud creaking, groaning, juddery sound emanating from this area. And if left unchecked, it'll get loud enough that you can hear it in the driver's seat anyway. If we take a quick look at the strut, we can see some metal that in the centre that doesn't look quite right. So you want to choose level firm ground, put the handbrake on, chock the wheels, locate the jacking point and jack the car up, and place your axle stand in a suitably firm place, such as the engine subframe. Take the wheel off and don't forget to put it under the car body for extra security. When you've got the car up on the stands, first thing you want to do is put your gloves on, protect your skin. Second thing you want to do is have a nice cup of tea. If we take a look at the strut with the wheel off, you can see that the top mount bearing here has just failed and it's dropped down. And what this does is enable the spring to turn when you turn the wheels. If these fail, they seize up and stop the spring and put pressure on the spring, put torsional forces on it, and the spring starts twisting and is liable to break. So when you hear the noise from these top bearings, then it's time to change them out quickly. If you leave them, you run the risk of twisting the spring, and in this case this has either been left too long or been turning and it's broken. You can see it's broken at the top there. I don't know if you can just see that. And that's the top part of the spring, and it's broken away and is left on the road somewhere. So then the spring has just gone around the seat, the bearing, and is resting up against the mount. So when you take all that out, it's resting on the mount here. It should be that'll come out with the spring still held in place on the mount. I also have to be careful. I take that off. So to take the strut off, we have to take a few things off the strut itself, which is this cable. This is the ABS cable. I have to unclip it from down here, the standard VW Volkswagen Audi clip, with put your screwdriver in, flat-bearded screwdriver in, and pull it to one side, and then it should come off. And then that will slip out here. Little grommet, just pull that out like that. These will come out. So they just open up and you pull them out. And I'm going to just tie that out of the way. You need to take this joint here, the trap rod end, out. So that needs cleaning up with a wire brush. Clean the socket out. Spray with a bit of penetrating fluid. We've got the anti-roll bar tie bar, which is attached here at the strut. You need to take that off. And finally we've got the pinch bolt at the back of the strut, which you can see here, the head of the bolt being a 12-point star fitting, M14. Again, clean any corrosion out of the socket and spray with penetrating fluid. And the nut on the other side, this needs a really good clean with a wire brush and soaking in penetrating fluid, as does the top of the hub where it meets the strut round here. Then you want to leave for a good amount of time before you take all the fixings off. This tie bar is a 19mm held by a 5mm Allen key to hold the centre shaft. Once you've got the nut off, you just tap it with a hammer. If it doesn't come off, in this case I've got to use a ball joint splitter, which is a really good and effective tool for these. Just be careful not to damage the gaiter on the tie rod end, and it should come off nicely. Now to undo this tie rod here, we want a 15mm socket on there, and it has a flat piece to stop it rotating, stop this centre shaft rotating. It doesn't have an Allen key in the end on this one. It has a flat piece behind here, and that's a 16mm. I can show you on a new one. Just fits on like that to stop it rotating. I'll stop there, and you want to put a bar in down here. Just take the pressure off the anti-roll bar, so you can just take the tie rod out. Move that to one side. There we go. For the spline bolt, you want a 12-sided star bit and suitable wrench. I'm using a 1/2" wrench here. On the nut side, make sure the socket is a really good fit and fully onto the nut. And again, a suitable wrench. And as long as you put plenty of penetrating fluid on, it should come off easily. Gently tap with a hammer and draw the bolt out. Clean up the back of the split hub. Here's a location spacer divider, and here's the expansion gap, which you need to open up slightly to extract the strut. There are various methods to open up the split hub, such as a metal wedge chisel or even an Allen key, but I would recommend the special tool, which is designed to open up the hub precisely to the correct gap without stressing the hub too much. Here's the tool. As you can see, it's an oval shaped bit, and it's got two flat pieces on the long side of the oval, which hold the bit in the open position when you turn it, so you can get the strut out. Insert the bit here and just tap it in a little bit. Make sure it's secure, hold it firmly and turn it 90 degrees to open the hub up. Once you've opened the hub up, it's just a matter of sliding down the hub from the strut till it comes off at the bottom. Then just move the hub out of the way, put the strut to one side. You can clearly see the split in the hub, which will need all cleaning up all around this area before you put the strut back in. Once the strut's out, take the little tool out to relax the hub. Now you've just got the 3 top mount bearing bolts to undo. These can corrode underneath the wing, so you need to douse with plenty of penetrating fluid and leave for some time or even overnight. Whatever you do, don't undo the centre bolt holding the damper on, otherwise the strut will shoot out of the bottom of the car and potentially break your foot or something. Undo each bolt a little bit at a time in turn, whilst holding onto the strut underneath the arch. Then draw it out from underneath. Fit the spring compressors and compress the spring. What we'll say about compressing springs is it's extremely dangerous, so if you don't feel competent, then you're best taking the strut into a local garage, which shouldn't cost too much to fit. Once compressed, the spring is under immense pressure, and if released, they can do serious harm. So you need to make sure they're seated correctly with the hooks on the coils and correctly aligned horizontally opposed to each other. On reflection, I've actually fitted these the wrong way around, with the tails pointing downwards just past the spring mount base, which could, but didn't in this case, compromise the winding process. What you don't want is anything that's going to push the hooks off the springs, so make sure you point them in the opposite direction where the tails are sticking upwards past the top strut mount where there's greater clearance, and then wind them down evenly. What I do is I measure the thread length as I'm going along, and only just do a few turns at a time. And yes, it will take you forever to do it. It takes ages, but be patient, you'll be able to do it eventually. Just take your time and be very careful. Always checking that the hooks are on the coils and not slipping around at all. Make sure you wear protective thick gloves and protective boots and eyewear. Try and do it at arm's length and in a suitable place away from everything else and people. I usually do it outside the garage in open space. You only need to compress the spring just to get the top mount off. So when there's a space, a gap between the top coil and the mount, then you can take it off. What you need is a 22mm swan neck ring spanner and a 5mm Allen key. The bump stop's been replaced previously and still in good condition, so I'll reuse that. If yours is deteriorated, I'd advise buying a new one. And unwind the coil just as carefully as you wound it. Fitting the new coil, make sure it's aligned correctly and you have the compressors in the correct place for clearance with the strut and the mount. You can see here just where it fits on the strut. Here's the retaining hooks and the stop. And as before, carefully compress the spring, measuring the length and hook security as you go. Once you've compressed the spring sufficiently to get the mount on, then remember to put all the parts in the correct sequence with the bump stop in place, with the dust guard. Align the spring at the bottom on the strut and put the nut on the top. Tighten into the correct torque. Carefully wind out the compressors so the spring seats on the strut correctly. Make sure you push the dust guard fully up into the mount. It needs to clip into place all the way around at the top. And at the bottom I've previously added a zip tie, as these tend to ride up a little bit, being a concertina construction. And then return the strut to the car. And another cup of tea. Lift the strut back under the wheel arch and align the mount with the holes and reattach all the bolts. Just loosely in place before we put the bottom of the part of the strut in. The hub. Fit the hub expansion tool and open up the hub. Then fit the strut into the hub and waggle down till it seats at the bottom and the little tag at the back is in line with the pinch bolt holes. When you're happy with its seating, fit the new spline bolt, tighten to the correct torque. In this case it's 60 Newton meters plus a further 90 degrees, so use a marker pen to do the final tightening. Reattach the sway bar rod and track rod end and refit all the cables back into the clips. What I always do is put plenty of grease on the threads sticking through the top mount underneath the wing, just to help them from corrosion. Then you want to go up to the top strut inside the engine bay and tighten the bolts to the correct torque. In this case it's 15 Newton meters plus 90 degrees. And you've done it. Job's a good one. All you've got to do now is put the wheel back on, lower the car to the ground, run it backwards and forwards, and as we replace the coil spring, then we should replace the other side as well to match. I would always recommend with these type of suspension components to replace them in pairs, as the likelihood is that if one bearing is seized, then the other one could follow shortly afterwards. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, please like, share and subscribe. I really do appreciate that, and a real big thank you for everybody that has subscribed. It really helps me build a channel for you guys. Thanks for making suggestions for new videos. Keep those coming, and I'll see you in the next video.